Greetings, everyone. I am Lucas Henriques Rocha. I'm a lawyer, alumni of University of São Paulo, and a BRICS researcher. I am very pleased and delighted to coordinate this panel, whose main topic, agriculture and food security, is of the utmost importance, mostly in this context of increasing challenges in the planet, such as climate change and food scarcity. Due to the complexity of the subject, BRICS has invited renowned specialists, which are going to aid us with their vast knowledge. Tirso Meirelles, Sofélio Wichemang, José Nantala, and Patrícia de Paiva Medeiros. Before we commence the presentation, I would like to give some brief remarks. The attendee list will be placed in the comment section. And if the public have any questions to be addressed to the speakers, they can wait for the presentations to end, and then we are gonna address the questions to the panelists. So we're going to start with Tirso Meirelles. Tirso is an economist and a business manager. He holds a master's in business and policy by FAP, Fundação Armando Álvares Penteado. Currently, he is the chairman of FAESP, São Paulo's Agricultural Federation. He also holds a seat in the council of FIESP, São Paulo's Industry Federation, USP, University of São Paulo, and also UNESP. And Tirso is going to deliver his speech in Portuguese, and we're going to broadcast in the screen his English translation, which his staff has kindly offered us. Tirso, oi, tudo bem?
Olá.
É um prazer ser agraciando, enfim, com sua presença, e você pode começar. Eu vou transmitir aqui o discurso em inglês.
All right. Good morning. It's very happy about start with us. It's very important for me because it's the important the news peoples in the other country about the suggestion and the parity with the others country. But congratulations, Lucas and José Natala, e também de Patrícia Medeiros. It's very nice the Tesolo Fellow. Yes, Tesolo Fellow. Okay. I'm sorry, but my English no good, so I prefer speak in Portuguese, but I wrote in the English. É com grande honra participar dessa conferência que discute o papel dos BRICS na construção de uma ordem multipolar mais justa, equilibrada e cooperativa. Falo em nome da Federação da Agricultura e Pecuária de São Paulo, Serviço Nacional de Aprendizagem Rural e da Confederação Nacional da Agricultura, instituições que há décadas trabalham para fortalecer o setor agropecuário e valorizar o produtor rural brasileiro. O Estado de São Paulo é uma referência global em tecnologia, inovação, sustentabilidade no campo. Nosso agronegócio responde por uma parcela significativa da produção de alimentos, fibras e energia do Brasil, contribuindo de forma decisiva para a segurança alimentar mundial. Produzimos com eficiência, respeito ao meio ambiente e o alto valor agregado, pilares que nos posicionam como parceiros estratégicos para qualquer nação que busca ampliar sua cooperação no setor agroalimentar. Entretanto, a agricultura global enfrenta desafios que ameaçam sua sustentabilidade. As mudanças climáticas, a degradação ambiental, já afetam cerca de 40% das terras agrícolas do planeta, exigindo adaptações urgentes. No Brasil, pequenos produtores responsáveis por grande parte da produção de alimentos ainda enfrentam baixa mecanização e acesso limitado ao crédito, tecnologia e inovação. Além disso, barreiras comerciais e falta de financiamento dificultam a modernização e a transição do sistema produtivo mais sustentável. Neste contexto, os BRICS devem liderar uma agenda voltada à sustentabilidade, inclusão e intercâmbio tecnológico. Propõe-se consolidar a parceria da restauração de terras com apoio do novo Banco de Desenvolvimento, criar uma rede de mecanização da agricultura familiar, da pequena agricultura, que promova e transfira tecnologia, produção local em máquinas, acelerar e certificar certificação eletrônica integrada e fortalecer a agroenergia como pilar da transição verde. Também é essencial ampliar a participação das mulheres e dos jovens rurais, garantindo capacitação e acesso ao crédito. No estado de São Paulo, o sistema FAESP-Senar se deu passos significativos nessa direção, com a criação do Centro de Excelência, polos regionais dedicados à formação técnica e inovação em áreas estratégias da produção agrícola e pecuária, irrigação e sustentabilidade. Esse centro simboliza a nova fase do agronegócio paulista, um setor que não apenas produz, mas também educa, pesquisa, inova e compartilha conhecimento. São a semente da excelência plantada para gerar produtividade, inclusão e produtividade. A nona conferência dos BRICS, na Universidade de São Paulo, representa um marco no fortalecimento da cooperação internacional pela segurança alimentar global. Com 40% do produto interno bruto mundial e 33% das terras agricultáveis do planeta, os BRICS têm legitimidade para liderar uma agenda de desenvolvimento sustentável, inclusive e solidário. O sistema FAESP-Senar reafirma seu compromisso com essa missão, promovendo produtividade, responsabilidade socioambiental e intercâmbio tecnológico, contribuindo para a eficiência do agronegócio brasileiro na alimentação do mundo. Diante desse cenário multipolar, em consolidação, reafirmo que o agronegócio é uma força de estabilidade e prosperidade global. Num mundo em que os alimentos, energia e água são temas estratégicos. O Brasil, e especialmente São Paulo, desempenha um papel essencial na construção de soluções conjuntas para o desafio compartilhados da humanidade. Coloco, portanto, a FAESP-Senar à disposição dos países do BRIC, como interlocutores institucionais e parceiros, para que conheçam de perto o agronegócio brasileiro e paulista, sua potencialidade e oportunidade de cooperação. Estamos totalmente abertos a aprofundar o diálogo técnico, científico e comercial com todas as nações que compartilham com o objetivo de promover um desenvolvimento sustentável e equilibrado. Convido ainda todos os participantes a conhecer os projetos do nosso Centro de Excelência do Senar, que tem justamente o propósito de promover capacitação técnica e inovação em áreas estratégicas do agronegócio. Acreditamos que esses centros podem se tornar espaço fundamental de intercâmbio para alcançarmos nossos objetivos comuns, ao unir a força de tecnologia e da expertise agrícola brasileira à dos países dos BRICS. Avançaremos mais rapidamente rumo à segurança e eficiência necessária para produzir alimentos cada vez mais qualidade, sustentabilidade e responsabilidade social. Agradeço à Universidade de São Paulo e o GE-BRICS por reunirem academia, governo, sociedade, produtores em torno de um diálogo tão necessário. Que esta conferência marque mais um passo rumo ao mundo multipolar, em que o conhecimento e a cooperação passam realmente a florescer. Meu muito obrigado a todos vocês.
Mu- Muito obrigado, Tirso, pela excelente apresentação. Thank you very much for this excellent presentation.
Thank you.
It was very insightful to find out about great potential that BRICS has in order to become this agriculture powerhouse in the 21st century. So let's keep going. Now I'm giving the microphone to Nantala. Nantala, he is a lawyer. He's the head of agribusiness in Martin Villac law firm. He is an alumni of Mackenzie Presbyterian University. He holds a master's in European Studies by Coimbra University in Portugal. And furthermore, he holds a master's and is also a PhD on international law by USP, University of São Paulo. We're very delighted to have you, Natala, with us today, and you can commence.
Thank you so much, Lucas. I hope everybody is able to listen to me well. It's a great pleasure once more to be here in another BRICS conference. It's the ninth BRICS conference, and I am one of the founders of GBRICS, of our study group on BRICS in the University of São Paulo. And it's very impressive for me because when we started this group 10 years ago in 2015, we didn't know that from 4 members in the beginning trying to study and to look for good sources of study about BRICS, we would become in 10 years 40 members, and with already 9 conferences like this, internationalized with a full range of important discussions, important matters that we try to cover during our conferences, and which are very important for the discussion of the multipolar world that we are trying to conform nowadays as a response for the problems that we had with centralized and sometimes unequal structures. So it's a great pleasure to be here once more in this conference, this very important conference, which is something that we of GBRICS are very proud of, and which we work a lot with lots of love also to deliver it for everybody. So I would like to start my presentation. I'm going to share with you a content because what we are talking about today in this particular session is food security and agriculture, all of them, of course, observing as well sustainability and environment respect. This is something that is very important, and this is something that is a key issue for the real development of the world, for the real development of mankind. This is something that must be uh, looked upon by our authorities and by our multilateral organizations and initiatives. So let me just share with you here. I hope everybody's able to. Okay. When we talk about food security, one thing that comes to our mind is how many people suffer from food security in the world, of course. And back in 2015, we established the goals, the sustainable development goals. And one of the most important of those goals was the zero hunger. And we are quite far from what we established by then, because we are not being able to we are not being able as an international community to address this particular issue of hunger and food security with the responsibility maybe or with the strategies that we need to do. And we have nowadays in the world, as I took all those information from the hunger map 2025. Okay, so you can all find it out there. We have 2.3 billion people food insecure, at least moderately or severely affected by food insecurity in 2024. So this data is for last year. And what we see is that food security is an issue that must be addressed, of course, by agriculture. Agriculture is what produces food. And food comes from agriculture, and when we have an international system that really works well, food produced should be available for those people. They're not safe in terms of food access. And this is what we don't have nowadays. We have some developments on that, but mostly we have many problems related to public policy, to productivity, to efficiency, also geopolitics that influence this issue and that influence the access to food directly. And this is something that we must pay more attention to. And in my opinion, one thing that would certainly address this issue would be promoting productivity, efficiency, and environmental protection for agriculture, for producers of agricultural products. But not only in national, but also in regional and in international levels. We have, just for an example here, of national issues that are not necessarily purely national, but like inflation on food products, on food production, and the effects of inflation in food security. This also is in the statistics that we have in the FAO website, and also in the hunger map. A food inflation in products of 10% represents for food insecurity a 3.5% raise in terms of numbers of people affected by food insecurity worldwide. Okay, 10%. Child wasting from 2.7 to 4.3 increase. So a 10% raise in prices affects lives of people in this range, more or less. So this is very important because we need our policymakers to take care of the prices of our foods and the efficiency of their production. So because it affects directly human lives, it affects directly basic human rights of peoples around the world. And I am talking here as a Brazilian. I know the role of Brazil in food security and food production in the world. We know how Brazil is important in this particular topic. Okay. And what is very interesting is that combating malnutrition is not only giving access to food in general, but giving access to healthy food also. And healthy food that is normally more natural because it's the uh, it's the good lettuce, it's the good tomato that arrives for the people to eat, or meat, or healthy food is normally when we say healthy food is nutrient-rich foods. They are more expensive than the processed foods. And processed foods many times arrive in poor populations and poor places in the world more than healthy food, which is more natural. Okay, which are you don't need processing. And this is something that is very interesting because it shows us how we, as an international community, how we must endure to promote national production in the poor countries as well. How we must endure to help countries to produce their own food as well and give access to healthier food for their population as well. Not only buying from the others, but also reducing, because healthier food near your house, produced near your house, near your home, near your hometown, is more accessible and better for you and for our population to consume, to eat. But when it is not possible, trade is a solution as well. This is a discussion as old as it gets. But when it is impossible to produce internally, we have to trade. We must facilitate trade because we are not talking only about business. We are talking about people's lives. We are talking about comfort. We are talking about existence. So this is why food prices, and this is why food trade must be facilitated by governments, must be subject to public policy, and must be also protected by international law as it is nowadays in our legal framework. We can discuss how we are working with it and how we are not giving the importance that it already has in our international law. But we already have protection in terms of rights for the access of food, for the access of for the combat to malnutrition and food insecurity. And one important thing that many people, when we are just going to put here and another slide here, then I go backwards. But one thing that is very important, because when we are talking about food production and sustainability and respect to the environment, we can see that the Paris Agreement that we all discuss, and we all want to see it well performed. Paris Agreement establishes in the Article 2 that environmental initiatives must not affect or threat food production. Because we need the Paris Agreement, any environmental and sustainable development agreement worries about one thing at most, which is mankind, the future of mankind. And if we don't have environment, if we don't have food security, why are we here? Why do we have international institutions? Why do we have, what's the goal if we don't give the basics? Okay? If we are not able as a society to provide the basics. So, in my opinion, it is all connected. Okay, so trade facilitation, and when you talk about tariffs and everything that's happening nowadays, and the barriers that those tariffs and other kinds of barriers, not only the tariffs, but also the other types of protectionism that we have, technical protectionism, for example, how it affects food distribution. We have a full set of international agreements in WTO and even in FAO in the United Nations, dealing with those subjects. And we all know that trade barriers are hurdles for the distribution not only of other goods, but also to food. And in poorer countries, when we have these kind of, for vulnerable populations, this kind of uncertainty in trade and this kind of uncertainty in the production and delivery of food makes an impact. It's a sensible impact, and it's something that we must avoid. So we must get back on track of trade facilitation, and we must get back on track on trade facilitation, mostly for food production. Okay. We need a reform of the system, as BRICS are discussing this since its first meeting back in 2006, not even 2009. BRICS are already talking about the reforms of the multilateral institutions. So we need a reform, but we need to get back on track, and we need to facilitate, especially food trade. Okay, and we must build new multilateral, not build, but reform at least multilateral institutions to ensure that food distribution is prevails. Okay? And nowadays we have, for example, something that is being discussed, if it is or it is not. Green protectionism, which is a kind of a barrier, is the UDR, and how the UDR affects the distribution of food, and also that the agribusiness market as a whole. This is the access for the European continent and the European Union markets. Of course, they are not in a very difficult position in terms of food security, of course, but it affects deeply the producers and the farmers of the developing countries, which have the European clients as one of their most important ones. So how EUDR is being covered, and how it is being negotiated, and how this could or could not be interpreted as green protectionism. Well, what we what we have and what we was even considered inside the European Union and the European Commission is that the UDR has been imposed to the countries um, that produce food, like Brazil and so many others. Say, well, you must protect your forests, and you must prove by my own rules that your forests are okay. So I am the one with the metrics. You are the one with the burden of proof to show me that everything is okay. Um, is it really something that is adequate to the legal framework that we have nowadays internationally? This is a great discussion because we have, of course, the need for sustainability. We have to protect our forests. We have to. This is very important. We have to protect more than that. We have to protect also the people who live in the forests, the traditional peoples that live there, that know uh, uh, the place. We have to protect this. But why? Why access to a to a particular market depends on that. And why I still have forests, I must be fiscalized by somebody who got rid of their forests. How? Why should I rely on that? And why should I rely that their metrics is the best one? These things that are at stake and are being discussed internationally, but this shows nowadays how the lack of of um, of an international governance that uh, um, includes everyone is needed because this is the type of discussion that must be internationalized, must be brought and decided in international forums, not only in regional ones. Yeah. And when it comes to food security, that's exactly the same. We must treat this and we must treat those issues internationally, not only in regional or national levels, and that impose our views on everybody else. Okay. Well, uh, talking now about Brazil. We have Brazil sustainability. We know that agribusiness worldwide is responsible for example, for 18% of emissions um, of greenhouse gas emissions. And in Brazil, it's more or less 27%. Okay, but what is interesting is that this comparison in Brazil does not show exactly that our agribusiness pollutes more than the agribusiness worldwide. Because what we have in Brazil is that our energy sector emissions is very much lower in gas emissions than global average. So balances and the sectors and the industry sectors are more or less uh, differently positioned in the emissions that we calculate here in Brazil. Okay, because we don't have the same pattern as the whole world has, and even BRICS have. We know that BRICS countries mostly depend on fossil fuels and also in coal as basic energy production. And we know that worldwide, 70% of emissions are basically coming from the energy sector. In Brazil, that's not the case. In Brazil, 88.1% of our energy is generated by renewable sources. So hydro, biofuels, and biofuels is something very associated with agriculture as well. Okay, sugarcane, corn, and everything that we're doing. So in Brazil, the situation is a lot different from the average that we have worldwide. This I'm trying to show here in this. And this is very important because Brazilian agriculture is not only trying to become greener, but it's also part of the greener strategy in the worldwide range for the production of biofuels and renewable energy. And we were discussing yesterday in one of our panels here at our conference about how green actually those greener energies really are. But this is not the subject of our discussions here. But if you get back to yesterday, the audience gets back to the discussions yesterday, you will see there a whole panel discussing this with climate change and energy transition. So the thing here is that we need to keep food production and we need to keep it sustainable. And what can we do for that? What can we do for our agribusiness here in Brazil become a little bit more become greener, and what we are doing nowadays? Okay. We have lots of initiatives coming, and sometimes we do not explore them very well in international forums like this. But we have, since 2010, the plan ABC of Embrapa and of our agricultural ministry. We established goals for the food production in Brazil, and also the environmental responsibilities, the environmental compliance of our farmers here in Brazil. We have something that has been treated as something new in international level, which is the no-tillage system, which has been, I don't know for how many years it's been in use here in Brazil, but we never took that attention on that in terms of carbon sequestration and the quality of the soil and how it affects and how it sequestrates also carbon. But now we are doing this and collecting data about it. Biofertilizers and the scalable use of biofertilizers, something that was object of study of Mariangela Hungria, who received recently the World Food Prize. She's an Embrapa, Embrapa is very important. Okay, in Brazil, Embrapa is a public company who invests, and develops new strategies and new technologies for agricultural production. And it's one of our best examples of public companies here in Brazil. So Mariangela Hungria is studying biofertilizers in Brazil for 4 years, and more or less, and we're doing great achievements in this field. Well-managed pastures, how our farmers are investing on that, and the data that we are also gathering to show people the evolution of our production as well in terms of sustainability. crop livestock forest integration, uh, uh, ideas to integrate production with forest, to integrate production with more types of cultures in the same area, uh, which is good for the soil, sequestrates carbon, and everything else. And how those new technologies that we have nowadays, even for the control of the farms in with applications, with drones, with satellite images, and how this also influences and helps this kind of production. And of course, animal food tech, because what everybody say about livestock is that some of the digestion of cattle influences in greenhouse effects. And we are using lots of new technologies for animal food to help with this process as well and diminish the emissions. Okay, we are of course a global leader in agribusiness. We nowadays we are number one. Last year we were ahead of we were ahead of the United States as the global leader in agricultural exports and also production, because we even in cotton. So we are so as a leader we have responsibilities, and we have responsibilities to show the world how we can do it in a sustainable way, because we have an energy production that is mostly renewable. And if it's sustainable or that sustainable or not, we're discussing it, but not only in Brazil. But we have renewable energy and we can do better as well in agribusiness, but we are not, and we must not be seen as villains, or our producers must not be seen as villains because or responsible for the greenhouse effects worldwide, which sometimes people intend to do. Uh, what we must do is to improve and show the improvements, show what is happening, and show also what we already have and nobody else in the world have. Right? We have our forest code, which says exactly that, for example, in the Amazon forest area, 80% of any property there, which has a part of forest inside, must preserve 80%. 80% of the property must not be touched by the owner. It must produce only 20%. In other regions of the country, the, even those regions that doesn't have protected biomes, we still have at least 20% obligation. Obligations, a legal obligation. It's not something, not a recommendation. It's a legal obligation. We must preserve at least 20% of the property to keep the biomes, to keep the forest and the biosystem. Okay. Where else in the world we have this? It's very, it's not a small thing. The thing is, we must prove that this law is enforced, because this is also something that is not so simple to do. Because even our authorities, our farmers as well, but our authorities sometimes don't pay attention to the data and the importance of data and the importance that it brings for the safety of our production, and the safety of our farmers, and the safety of our country and of food production as a whole. If we had the car, which is a, a public registry integrating environmental information of all farms and of all properties in Brazil, if we had that properly done, we would have much better messages, much better information to show the world about the reality of our agribusiness here. And we don't. We don't. And why we don't have it? Many times, the farmers who want to be cleaner, greener, and want to respect the laws, they make their registrations. They go there, they file everything, they spend a lot of money to do so, and the registry and the and the public authority responsible for that just cannot handle the cases as well as it must be, and takes a long time for approval, for verification of the property, and something that should have been resolved in 2 months takes more than a year. So the law enforcement is an issue that we have to discuss and that we have to improve as well here in Brazil, because I believe, for my experience and the data that that we collect from local authorities here in Brazil, that the situation of our agribusiness and of our production is a lot better than what is sometimes broadcasted. Okay. And also, if we do so, if our authorities understand that we need to improve these numbers, and if we improve these numbers in a global scale, and we can show the world what we already have here, we would have much more competitive advantage in terms of Brazilian products. Okay, well, now I'm talking more nationally, and access to the other markets, and also access to poorer countries and poorer regions for the food that we produce here. Because if we have everything okay, and if you say, well, we are greener enough, uh, people wouldn't complain that much about agribusiness, not only in Brazil, but especially in Brazil, because we are leaders, and as leaders, we must set good standards for the market. We have uh, the we have the leaders also have their dues to pay. So my conclusion is that uh, in Brazil, we need at a national level to increase budget for policy instruments and intensify compliance and law enforcement mechanisms. But this is also a reality for other countries and other BRICS countries as well. Uh, Brazil also has COP30 to happen now next month, and that in Berlin. It's a great opportunity for Brazil to lead the sustainability, agricultural production, agribusiness, uh, um, to lead the discussions, not only to be part of it, but to lead, because we are leaders in this segment. We have the responsibility to do so. And also, Brazil, as a leader in agribusiness, must lead also the discussions and sustainable agriculture discussions in BRICS countries. And something that has been developed or reinstated in Brazil this year as the action of Brazilian Embrapa in Africa, for example, with the establishment of its headquarters in Africa, now in Ethiopia, in Addis Ababa, where Embrapa intends to promote studies, integration, and technology transfer for African countries and BRICS countries as well, but mostly African countries, to develop agriculture there. So this is a good example as well. Brazil must show that besides its main product is agribusiness, is agricultural production. We are also worried about the national production of our of other countries and how we must cooperate for the development of those countries and the production of those countries, and how it would certainly affect in a better way food access for uh, uh, for those developing and underdeveloped countries that we still have, unfortunately, in our world. And we would, of course, cooperate to diminish a little bit this sad statistics that we still have about food insecurity and malnutrition in the world. So that's what I had to say. I think I took longer than I should, but sorry. Uh, Lucas, thank you so much.
No worries, Natala. Your presentation was excellent. Thank you for your valuable remarks on the different strategies that BRICS and humanity as a whole can use to tackle problems such as food scarcity. And thank you for the thorough insights on the agribusiness Brazilian landscape and how it's using different innovations, technology, legal mechanisms in order to foster sustainable food production. So now, continuing our expositions, I have the pleasure to introduce Patricia Arantes de Paiva Medeiros. Patricia, she is agribusiness specialized lawyer. She's the chief executive of Brazilian Rural Society. She holds a master's in law, justice, and impact on economics by SEGES, the Center of Economic and Social Law Studies. She's the author of a book, Economic Analysis on Agribusiness, the Competitiveness on the Agribusiness Global Market. Furthermore, she holds a master's in business law by Fundação Getúlio Vargas, a master's in law and economics by Lisboa Law College, and also a master's in business ethics by University of São Paulo. She also holds a seat in FIEG, Goiás Industry Federation, in the chambers of agribusiness, food, and beverages. And she also integrates the special committees of agrarian law and agribusiness in Brazilian National Bar. So Patricia, I'm very delighted to introduce you. So you can begin your speech. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lucas. Thank you, everyone. Congratulations, Nantalo, for your presentation. I really appreciate the invitation to be with you. I'm happy to be here to discuss our country. I'll make a resume here, and then I'll pass for my presentation. So Brazilian Rural Society is the pioneer of the institutionals that represents farmers and agribusiness in Brazil. So we have 106 years of history and legacy. So talking about these opportunities that we have in other markets is very special for us, and to verify the specialization of our agribusiness. So it's important to recognize that Brazil collaborates to supply the world with products addressing food insecurity and reducing instability in the global food supply. We stand out of the global geopolitical landscape due to stability of its commercial production. We are I think the second or the third, the number always changes because of the dynamics of economics, but we are the principal exporter of agricultural products. Our country maintains commercial export relationships, with over 200 countries. And especially during the pandemic, the COVID pandemic, we established ourselves as a stable and reliable supplier. So it's wonderful to say this in this event. So it's evident that Brazilian agribusiness has the potential to solidify our leadership by pursuing greater efficiency in both commercial and international relations, while also contributing to the global food security. So we have a good practice that is typically for the tropics, that is integration with crops, livestock, and some specific locations in Brazil. We have crops, livestock, and forestry. So I think that's very different from other countries. And then we can also be more stable with our form to produce and to deliver our products for the other countries. This was possible by using the technology that we have. Nantala said Embrapa, and here I'm trying to demonstrate that the technology has the origin with Embrapa, and then we pass for research and technology over the past 50 years that we have in tropical agriculture, principally in Cerrado, in states of Central West region that I came from, Goiás, Mato Grosso, and Mato Grosso do Sul. This makes rural producers and farmers more diversifies and diversifications, so we can deliver it with more security with our domestic and market and international customers. So in our view, the greatest risks that we have today, it's the tariffs, because we can transform these tariffs into a great opportunity to dialogue between the globally leading productive sectors and the other countries as well, the other producers, and especially United States, of course, to solidify our position as agricultural solutions to the world. So we think that this risk can be also a great opportunity to do that. Obviously, the climate change is mitigated by farmers, that they should be recognized as a service to the world, and it's our speech to the COP30. But now I think I'm going to share my presentation to facilitate for us. Just 1 minute, please. Okay, I think going to work. Lucas, can you tell me if you are?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Right, let's go. I try to put in the colors of the event, so I think it's more effective. So let's go. In our view, Brazil can be the solution for 4 world crises in our century, like food insecurity that we are talking about now, energy insecurity, as Nantala said about bioenergy and biofuels, climate change, of course, and economic poverty. So all the solutions that Brazil has to offer are part of our agribusiness. So I think it's very huge to say, but it's true, because our country has the principal sector, it's agribusiness, and then we can observe that the diversification of our products really can make a solution for the world, not even to our domestic market, but also to the international market. Here I put some data about Brazilian grain production among 1990 to 2024. So we can see the growing line between the years, and in green we see the areas that we have in Brazil that is productive in farmers. In blue, we can see the saved areas that we can make conservation with forest or other biomes. And the line in red, we can see the growing of the production. So we here can see the mix about the conservation and the productiveness among the years. In this other slide, I put the Brazilian production of animal protein, including pork, chicken, and beef, and also with the perspective with 1990 to 2025, our year. So we can see that all the proteins are growing among the years, especially the chicken and the beef. Of course, pork, it's growing as well, but we have the focus on chicken and beef because it integrates more cultures and more culinaries that we have in the world. As Nantala said, I put the plain ABC that we have in Brazil. It's government policy about technology with sustainability in Brazil. So the principal goal is to reduce emissions in 1.1 billion tons of emissions until 2030. So to obtain this goal, we have different phases and different things to do, like I put in the slide, direct planting in straw, crop livestock forestry integration, like I said in the beginning of my speech, recovery of degraded pasture. It's a wonderful project that we have here in Brazil with the government, but also with some firms like Syngenta that has enormous project with degraded pasture, planted forest, bio inputs, waste treatment, irrigated systems in cattle confinement. So we have these huge possibilities to integrate the farmer to technology and sustainability with plain ABC. Of course, we have some difficulties to implement this with farmers, but as institutional that represents the sector, we have this function to do this with more efficiency and to make the connections with the government and the farmers. Now I put a graphic here to talk about the Brazilian agriculture products international market. In the left, we see 2020, we have $20.6 billion being exported from Brazil. And we had a concentration between the forest products like trees and other things that we have on the sector. And then we have the soybean complex, and then we have the meat. So in 2024, we see a huge growing to $164.4 billion. But now we have concentration in soy, meat, and also with ethanol and other bioproducts that we have in Brazil. And about our clients, our customers, in 2020, we have a concentration in Europe, United States, and the third would be Asia. It was Asia, sorry. In 2024, we changed that thing, putting China at the first floor with 30.2% of our exportations. Then came Asia, so we really changed our relations with this territory in the world. And then we have Europe and United States. It's also the sixth one that we have the most international relations in Brazil. So we really change our customers profile among these 4 years, and we are trying to recognize that with our products and our quality of the public relations and the private relations with private sectors in each country. In Brazil, we can obtain this data if we saw our producers of grains. So 1 ton of grain can feed 4 people for a year. And in Brazil, we would feed 1.3 billion people for a year. So it's a huge amount of food security that we have in our country. And we are trying to do it more efficiently with more quantity and with more quality as well. So we are trying to put here the Brazilian energy metrics with biocombustibles as well, biofuels. We have biomass, hydropower, charcoal, and firewood, solar, wind, and other renewable energies, And we have also non-renewable energy that we also can make here in Brazil and can export. But obviously, we concentrate the solutions with the things that we can show the world the production of our sustainability with technology, and biofuels is the representation of that. In agribusiness in Brazil, we generate actually jobs and wealth with $2.1 trillion in Brazil in data with 2023. So 24% to that it's attached to agribusiness. So we have a population that can make prosperity and economic development with their regions in the center of Brazil, especially with the agribusiness and the agriculture. So it's a thing that we really try to develop in our country to make the life expectations and life quality more close to what we have in our countries that are more desenvolved that if Brazil. Agribusiness obtain prosperity, so we can have the data in 2024 that 28.4 billion formal employment were vinculated to agribusiness sector. So it's a huge amount of people that works in our farmers, in our agricultures and livestock producers. And to concentrate in the final part of my speech, I'd like to talk about our competitiveness advantages that we have in Brazil and our productions. So in the first floor, we have that advantages stemming from extensive territory that we have in our country, especially in productiveness frontiers with tropical and subtropical climates highly conducive to agriculture production. So it's a reality that we have in Brazil, in the past located in the south of our country, but now concentrated in the center west in our country, but in other regions as well. So that there we could integrate technology with the strength of our farmers to do things like we have now with this huge amount of numbers and prosperity with our sector. In the first floor, we have investments in technology driven by Embrapa system, but not also just with Embrapa, but other firms as well, which created an integrated and regenerative production model that is very different from our competitors like United States and other regions of the planet. So we can make 3 different harvests in the same area. So it's a thing that really helps us to be more productive and more competitive when we share the meaning of food security in the world. So we have the certain that Brazil can deliver the products and the agriculture products that there are in the contract with the customer. So we don't have a doubt that it's delivered to the client. So it's a huge thing to think and to brings to our price and our market. In the third floor, we have opening of foreign markets, offering remunerative prices that enable the improvement of quality in agribusiness and production chains. So we have this possibility to integrate the whole productions in the farm. In the fourth, the efficient rural and agri-industrial credit policy with support from the private and the cooperative financial system. Of course, we have some difficulties of the public credit, but in Brazil, laws and regulations, we have private credit policy that is very useful for the farmers. So we have this tentative to concentrate in money that is private, not the money that is public. So we are near to make this thing works, but now we have a lot of farmers that use private banks and private financial cooperative systems to improve their productions and their investments among the years and among the harvests. In the fifth floor, we have the strength of our agriculture production cooperatives, which can organize our supply, process products, and promote technological inclusion in the agriculture, especially for small farmers or family farmers that don't have the money to invest in some technology that is more expensive that they can do. So we organize that as cooperatives, cooperativeness, and then we can try to help to sell this to a trade market or international market with more safety of the price and the contract, and it's really working among these past 30 years. And we also have 4 factors that impact the central point in the market economic, which is the product competitiveness that I said in the beginning of my speech. The first one is law and legal with stability. We really need to ensure that in Brazil, so it's a point that we are trying to work with the legislative, the executive, and the Supreme Court to bring more stability to our sector. But we also have the necessity to access credit. As I said in the past slide, we have a public credit access, but we need to make more popular the private credit for farmers that are smaller than the medium farmer in Brazil. So it's a thing that's very important because we have economic instability among these years. So the credit is more expensive than we have over these past 10 years. So it's a thing that we're trying to make it better as well. So these 2 points make investments easier in Brazil, investments that came from other countries like China, United States, or Europe. So we're trying to make these investments more stable and more safety to the investors as well. And obviously, we can increase the added value to the productive sector, to agri-industry, and try to make the process here in Brazil to concentrate the prosperity here in our local farmers and local entrepreneurs. So these 4 factors, we try to make it like a whole at every step, but we are ensuring that it's step by step, by baby steps, we are trying to make it better. And I think to finish my presentation, we have key points about risk mitigation in Brazil. The first one is environmental aspect. Like Nantala said, we have COP30 in few days in Brazil, in Belém, do Pará. And we really need to make our communication of our sector in our institutions, in our government, in our private sector, more clear and more assertive, because we need to share correctly the practices that we have here in the presentations, and to show the graded value that we have in our product with preservation, conservation, and producers as well. So this thing is very important to us as an institutional that represents the legacy of agribusiness in Brazil. But the second thing, it's the social aspect. Of course, the environmental and social are very, very close to each other. But in the social aspect, I really want to highlight the reputation and the communication with transparency. We really need to show the data with the transparency to our internal and external clients, that our customers that wants to know what makes meat in Brazil more environmental than the meat of other clients, or sorry, on other suppliers or other countries that produce meat as we produce in Brazil. So we really need to make it more transparency to maintain our reputation and to obtain more goals in our prices. And the third aspect would be the economic as well. We need to make the analysis of financial opportunities that we have in our geopolitical system now, and obviously accept our protection our farmers and mitigate the risks of instability, economic instability, or make a mitigation with our perception with the private sector. So I think these three key points are really necessary to discuss and to advance for our country, for our customers to identify the opportunity of Brazilian agribusiness. So this is my contribution. Thank you, Lucas, for the invitation, and I'm here to complete the panel with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. It was an extremely interesting exposition. Thanks for offering us your knowledge on this topic about how Brazil's competitive advantages can be used to turn us into a key part of the battle of the solution to solve the so-called forward crisis, and also how factors such as credit access, a stable legal framework, the strengthening of agricultural cooperatives, they can be used in order to enhance this scenario, these advantages. Thank you very much. And so now, pardon. So now I'm going to introduce you Silofelo Wichaimang. And Silofelo, she is the regional coordinator of Thought for Food, an international organization which is aimed at enhancing and optimizing food production chains around the globe. She's also the CEO and co-founder of Sila Agriculture, which is a company whose main purpose is to provide consulting, market access to and technological solutions in order to mitigate food insecurity across the African continent. She once was a speaker at a TEDx speaker panel, and she is devoted to the fostering of sustainable development, mostly in the context of food production. So, Silofelo, I'm very pleased and very honored to give you the opportunity to begin your speech. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Lucas. Excuse me. Good morning. It's afternoon here. So good morning to everybody. I am so honored to be here. Thank you so much for the invite. I love, everything that I've heard so far. I think this conversation is one of those conversations that we can really dig deep into from so many different angles. And I love how each and every speaker has touched on things that I will also be touching on today. I have a presentation, but I'm not going to be using it because I want to not take up more time. I'm looking at the time, and I know that I'm going to speak for a really long time, but I do have a very clear message that I want to share with everybody. So before I get started, I just want to say again, thank you to the speakers and thank you to everybody who's joining. I hope that you have learned so much, because this topic might be content heavy, but what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to try and give maybe a different perspective, turn the conversation upside down, because I am a firm believer that, when we learn something theoretically, we need to walk away with actionable insights. So I can pick up a lesson, and I need to be able to tangibly change what I've learned into something that I can do in my own context. Given that, maybe let me start with a little brief biography of who I am and why it is I do what I do, so that you can understand then everything that I will say after that. So, as you have said, Lucas, my name is Tsulofelo Wechwe-Mang. Don't worry, it's a complicated name, even where I come from. And I spent 20 years in media before I came into food systems and agriculture. And I think that's very important because it changed how I interacted with the knowledge that I got when I received knowledge about food systems and agriculture. What created the biggest change for me, what made me move from media, because I was in TV, I was in radio, and I was in print media. So I've done media across the board, across the spectrum. But one of the things that I had studied at university was, food security and foreign aid. And it really baffled me how countries were growing food all the time. And yet there was still a need for foreign aid to mitigate that gap. And I couldn't wrap my head around why it was that we were all content with inequitable systems being proliferated, then creating this huge gap for a need for foreign investment and for foreign aid when it came to feeding locals. And so serendipitously, I went to an African Union Heads of State Summit. And one of the breakaway sessions that I found myself being a part of was African women in farming. And I remember I sat through the session, and it was a 3-hour session. And everything that happened in that 3-hour session was women who were crying, women farmers, agri processors, women in logistics. They were all crying out to their leaders, asking for help because, they had found themselves in a position where they either didn't have access to land, they didn't have access to resources, or they didn't have access to capital that would allow them to acquire those resources. And let's say you were lucky enough to be a woman who had land and capital and resources, then you couldn't get access to market because in those rural communities, men wouldn't take you seriously when you went to the market and tried to bargain and barter for yourself. And I remember leaving that situation going, there must be a solution. So for years, I'm learning more, but every time I learn more, I keep thinking, like, gosh, man, somebody must know how to fix this, right? And then I had a conversation with my mother, and she said something to me. She says, the things that bug you or convict you are the things that then you probably are the one sent to change. And so that's how I made my transition from media into food systems. My official job title is I am a food systems specialist. So what that means is I work across the food systems value chain. But what I did was I learned. After learning, I then immersed myself in the context. I started out by being a farmer, a smallholder farmer, growing spinach on 1 hectare of land. And then I grew incrementally from there. And then I started, trading. I remember I told Jose in a separate conversation that the only thing I've imported from Brazil is sugar. And I was really, really proud of that because that was my first big trade deal. And I was bringing sugar in from Brazil. And I was just like, oh my gosh, I'm a BRICS girly. So I've literally journeyed across the value chain right up until the point where I started working with other farmers, smallholder farmers to be exact, and then food processors, and then innovators in the food and ag tech space. All of this is important because I want to turn your attention back to smallholder farmers, whether that is in Brazil, whether that is in South Africa, whether that is in India, China, or any other of, our BRICS and BRICS plus nations. I really think now is the time for us to turn back our perspective to smallholder farmers because they actually, in my opinion, hold the key to changing the dynamics that we've been speaking about so proficiently today. When we look at smallholder farmers, they grow 80% of the world's food. And our policies, more often than not, look at macroeconomic movements, and they don't take into consideration the fact that it is the microeconomic farmers who are the ones who need to meet the demands of that macroeconomic policy, right? So one of the things that I think I want to touch on first is that 75% of the global production in ag comes from BRICS nations. 75% is a large number, right? And when we look at that, we're not just looking at the bigger economies like Brazil and China and India. We're also looking at the smaller players like South Africa, because we are growing so much grains and our surplus goes into the rest of Africa. So these aren't small things to these aren't small numbers, nor are they something that I think we should take for granted as we're having the conversation around smallholder farmers. Also, 2 billion people are directly supported by farming and agriculture in our nations. What does that actually mean? It means that if we start looking at smallholder farmers as the key to household and countrywide and region-wide food security, then we are actually tapping into 2 billion families who then don't go to bed hungry, who then don't live below the poverty line, who also are then able to contribute meaningfully to the market as we see it. So even when we are creating policies, we're creating policies that are then upheld by and supported by 2 billion families. And that, I think, is also a big deal. But let me go to the point that maybe I want to make to support my decision to turn our attention back to smallholder farmers. I think that when we look at who we are as BRICS nations, as a people, I want us to also consider the fact that most of the countries in the BRICS community have a large number of indigenous people. Why does that matter? That matters because when we think of smallholder farmers, they are more likely to be in rural communities, therefore living under a rural context. And that rural context is governed by cultural or traditional practices, which then speak to how they farm, speak to how they do work. And that is so important because when we create policies, or even when we start looking at innovating around food systems and around food markets, when we neglect the fact that all innovation starts off as contextual, then we neglect the fact that everything that comes from smallholder farmers is only as successful as the context that they come from. And so when I'm speaking to, for example, let me make an example in South Africa. In South Africa, there are a few companies, I can name a few, that have really harnessed indigenous knowledge and packaged it in a way where it allowed for the premium exporting of processed goods, right? When we look at teas, for example, or coffee, for example, these are things that are consumed worldwide. However, every country has its own tea and coffee culture. I'm sure there's a coffee culture in Brazil, right? And so when we look at the rural communities or the smallholder farmers that are growing and cultivating these teas and these coffees and this sugar, for example, and even the grains, because I think we also need to be very cognizant of the fact that, there is a growing demand for indigenous grains worldwide because so many people are allergic to gluten. So even though we are major exporters of wheat, we also do need to go back to looking at sorghum and millet and quinoa and, buckwheat, which are growing very easily in our BRICS nations and in rural communities within BRICS nations. Anyway, back to the example. Teas and coffees in particular. We don't grow coffee in South Africa. We grow teas. We grow Ceylon tea that is also grown in Asia, that is also grown, in the UK, but we also grow indigenous and herbal teas. And a company like Sitsong Tea and a company like Indiza Foods have taken, ownership of cooperatives or have come into partnership with cooperatives in the regions that grow these teas in order to help cooperatives in rural areas not only gain market access, but also learn to grow the product, process the product, and then export it into global markets. Statistically, if you are only growing something and selling the raw product, you're only making 6%. 6% of the final value of that product. Rural communities don't need foreign direct investment. They need people who will help them to upskill and to innovate what they already have in order for them to actually become globally competitive. And this is the thing, because smallholder farmers more often than not grow whatever it is that they're growing or rear whatever it is that they're rearing in between 2 and 5 hectare plots of land. They are also able to create an ecosystem that is not only biodiverse, but they are also that is higher in productivity and yield than somebody who grows in a monocultural 500 acre or 500 hectare farm. And so that also introduces us to the fact that smallholder farmers are the best starting point for circular economy and sustainability processes as we know them now, but also as we would like them to be in the future. We touched on also how with the Paris Agreement, there are so many legal loopholes, right, that call for the lessening of land being used for food production so that land can also be, reintroduced into sustainable circles for renewable energy processes. But I've come to recognize that when we focus on empowering smallholder farmers and empowering their ability to grow within circular economies, then what we're also doing is we're mitigating, the energy loss, and we're creating a positive or a net positive carbon footprint when we work with smallholder farmers versus when we're working with commercialized farmers, because smallholder farmers, by far use up less energy in the growing and in the rearing of their foods. Number one. Number two, when we introduce that circular economy cycle, what we then do is we teach them how to turn their waste not just into the energy that Patricia was talking about. It could be biofuel, biomass, composting. Also, just when we learn how to mitigate all of the waste that is coming from these smallholder farmers and turning it into something more viable, we're also able to create rural communities that live within that closed loop ecosystem of a circular economy that allows for them to also spend less money while living better quality lives. And no greater place is indigenous knowledge. Tapping into that indigenous knowledge that already rests in those communities will then help us create systems that are contextually viable, but also economically thriving. The other thing that I want to also touch on is biodiversity. When we speak about food systems, I think sometimes we lose sight of the fact that the planet is a closed loop ecosystem that knows how to heal and restore itself. And when we farm commercially, we lose track of that because we're only thinking about the bottom line. When you meet a coffee farmer who's been doing it for generations and generations, and they're using, 200 hectares to farm coffee, all they're thinking about is, for the past 20 years, these are the margins that we've attained, and this is the thing that we're trying to maintain. But the truth of the matter is that there are, tools and mechanisms and even platforms of exchange. I love how we spoke about, I hope I pronounce this properly, Embrapa. Embrapa, our version of Embrapa is called ARC, the Agricultural Research Council, right? And when I think about how we're having this conversation with university students and with thought leaders, what greater thing can we do than invest in research that allows for innovation using tech, innovation using indigenous knowledge, but also innovation that is resting on circular economy principles and sustainability principles. When we go to Embrapa and we partner them up with their South African counterpart, their Russian counterpart, their Chinese, Egyptian counterpart, then what we do is we create, a portal of exchange where we can learn why the Egyptians or how the Egyptians can grow in semi-arid areas, so that even when we're facing the crisis that is climate change, we are then taking on knowledge from different climates and learning to apply it in a sustainable way within our own climates. One of the things that I learned from wine farmers in South Africa, which is why I think this is so important, is that every 20 years, we have a drought cycle. So every 20 years, we'll come into a new 2 to 3 year drought phase, and then the 20-year cycle will begin again. But you see how that's indigenous knowledge that then allows for our markets, not just our farmers, but our markets to then start preparing for the changes that are coming. And with the uncertainty of climate change, with the uncertainty that's coming with all of these crazy tariffs and, this political, mayhem, we then can then say, no, don't worry. We've got this as thinkers, as change makers. We can then go out there, speak to our smallholder farmers, and start implementing changes that allow not only for those smallholder farmers to thrive, but for them to also be able to eat and not go to bed hungry. And then lastly, I need us to understand this, that smallholder farmers are the real sustainability champions. You cannot say that 80% of the world's food growers are invisible. If 80% of the world's food production is grown by smallholder farmers, then we need to understand that anything that they do wrong is going to perpetuate the imbalances that we're trying to fix, whether at a micro or macroeconomic level, whether at a policy level, or even at a climate change and food systems level, right? I also want to touch on the fact that it is time that we stopped. Look, BRICS countries are some of the most brilliant spaces and ecosystems you can find yourselves working in. And because I work in the Global South, I love traveling across BRICS countries and working and learning from them. But what I want to say is smallholder farmers also teach us the power of decentralized success. Because sometimes when we focus only on the centralized institutions that are at play, we miss the fact that changes will happen whether or not you support them, whether or not you have time to think them through. Changes are happening on the ground all the time. So by the time the policy has been, researched, written, ratified, and then by the time you start that implementation process, when you have focused on smallholder farmers and you take that top down perspective instead of, when you take that bottom up perspective instead of that top down perspective, then what you have is you also have the speed that comes with implementation, because from the bottom, people are ready to work on solutions that enable them to feed their families. There isn't a smallholder farmer who will spit in the face of a solution that works. And as researchers and thinkers and people who are doing, we really need to start focusing on the fact that there is power in working within the decentralized and the grassroots level, even when we're thinking of how do we frame these policies, or how do we implement these economic changes, or what is the real hindrance in our food systems? What is the real hindrance in our food innovation? And even when we start looking at STEM, when we decentralize the accessibility to STEM subjects, we allow for real, pure, and vibrant innovation to then come in and infiltrate our food systems, therefore mitigating food hunger and poverty as we know it. So in closing, I've tried to speak as quickly as I can. In closing, I think my colleagues have been really brilliant in sharing some of the things that I think are pertinent for us to actually be thinking about actively as change makers in food systems. And I really think that when we shift our focus not only from where we are and what we do really well to those who are actually on the ground at grassroots level, using those hoes and using those very rudimentary tools and resources and still feed us. When we change our perspective to those people, then I really think that our policies and all of the efforts that we're putting in to bringing about change will actually create a greater ripple effect and garner far more impact, because the minute you change what the real market is doing, then you'll see the impact not only in the numbers but also in the policies. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Solofelo. Thank you for the unique and very insightful presentation. It was a true example of thinking outside of the box, because as you have said, as you have wisely pointed out, many specialists and many policymakers, well-intentioned, by the way, they tend to neglect the smallholder farmers, right? They tend to focus on the big company, on the big landowners, and then they just cast aside. They forget the true potential that you have explained to us of this small rural farmers and how they can be a solution to tackle the issue of food security. So it was, thank you very much. It was an extremely original and unique speech. And okay, so now we have 15 minutes left for presentation. Now it's time to answering some questions of the public. We have sorted out a couple questions, and if do you want all of you to answer? It's fine for you, like all of you. Okay. So the first question is, does BRICS countries have any mechanism or treaty within the group to share agricultural technology and know-how? If yes, how does it work? So Rafael, do you want to begin? Like we can make in reverse order. So Rafael, Patricia, then Tala, then.
Wow, that caught me off guard there. So, to my knowledge, there isn't one particular mechanism. There are many mechanisms, especially when you look at how we navigate the BRICS relationship and the nexus of the bilateral agreements between the countries themselves. So, for example, we have relationships with China, and our bilateral relationship with China, has allowed for a lot more exchange of knowledge and resources versus our relationship with China as a whole in the forum that is BRICS. So I think that it is important to then say what is it that you're looking to bridge? What gap are you looking to bridge? And then firstly look at the bilateral agreements that come into play first, and then you can then move on to the overarching BRICS umbrella, because I think that the bilateral agreements will have a greater you'll have a greater speed of implementation there versus just going under the overarching BRICS umbrella. Yeah, that is the answer.
Thank you. And Patricia?
I agree with the answer. I think it's more related to bilateral corporations. And as I noticed that really we have in Brazil, we have in China, we have in South Africa, but I think it's near that it's answered before me.
Thank you. Natala?
I think, well, my perspective here, just as Sulofelo said and Patricia reinforced, what we see is that there are many common agenda within the countries, but not within the group as a whole. We have, of course, the groups, the working groups that address agriculture in every BRICS summit that we have, preparatory working groups and joint initiatives, but not something to be looked upon as a whole for the whole group. We have partnerships, and one particular in particular that I'm very interested in for the coming years is this one that between Embrapa and the African Union, which involves, of course, some of the BRICS countries in Africa. And the headquarters for this initiative is based in another BRIC country, which is Ethiopia, in Addis Ababa. It was restated this year, so it's in the very beginning. But I'm very curious about it because I think as Embrapa is involved, that and as the African Union is also involved, and both have lots of common interests and lots of common goals to be addressed in this regard, especially when it comes to improve agriculture and food production in Africa. I think there will be very interesting outcomes. So this is something to in the coming future.
Thank you very much, Natala. So we have here a second and a last question. If possible, I would like to know how the Global Alliance Against Poverty and Hunger can further boost Brazil's role in the global food chain. So, Natala, do you want to answer? Make like in reverse order now, Natala, Patricia, now, Silvio.
Okay, well, this alliance is very important for food security. Patricia shared with us some data that are very important. We know how we are big producers of much of the most important, or not the most important, but some very important agricultural products here in Brazil, such as soy, sugar, coffee, but mostly soy and sugar, basic for many of the animal food and food as a whole. The production that we have here in Brazil is the basis not only for human food, but also for animal food, and animal food is responsible for the safety and the health of animals who are also food humans. So I believe that Brazil plays a very important role in this agenda, a very important role because we are great food producers. And we must set standards, and we have all the tools to set those standards, as also Patricia showed us everything that we are doing. And we must only showcase what we have and what improvements that we must do as well to become better leaders, to become leaders that also demonstrate that we need improvement despite our leadership, despite our position in market, and despite our position in production and in food production, and our responsibilities as well as food producers to decrease the sad numbers that we have in malnutrition and food insecurity in the world nowadays.
Thank you very much. Patricia?
Natala was totally complete. I think I don't have nothing to add, but just one phrase. I think it's important to remember that all of this information that Natala said, in Brazil, we can increase these solutions with conservation. So it's very important to communicate it better and then demonstrate the solution that makes our food more safety for the world, and also our environmental more safety to be against the climate changes. So I think it's just in these two add.
Thank you very much. And Sula Fellow?
I think for me the partnership, I can't just speak to Brazil. I think I want to speak to BRICS, but I genuinely think that a partnership of this nature actually helps to focus the it helps to solidify the focus on ending hunger, and it helps to sharpen the policy around ending hunger, because that the Global Alliance, their policy frameworks are very suited and very accurately niche for ending hunger. And I think that sometimes, even as policy creators, we have a hard time balancing all of the things that we need to balance, because obviously there's an intersectionality between policies. It's not like a policy lives in isolation. And so I think one of the things that would really be helpful is in focusing or narrowing down on, it'll help BRICS countries to narrow down on creating more food security policies that are actually impactful. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Well, it seems that we don't have any further more questions. So I would like to thank you again, Patricia, Natala, and Sulafelo, and also Shirso, for the enriching and very remarkable insights that you have provided us. You are truly well-versed specialists on this topic. And I'd also like to thank Imbrachina for helping us host this panel, and also for the public for lending us your precious time in this Tuesday morning, and also for the BRICS as a whole for organizing this event. So thank you all, and well, have a good day.
We have more panels coming on, so stay tuned, everybody. We want the audience for the whole for the whole conference. So stay tuned. We are going to start a new one in a few minutes. So stay with us.